Welcome back to the show. End of message. That's the entire message.
Stay with the script. Stay with the script, Mr. Byman.
I think somebody might have messed up the script for today. And I'm not going to name any names, George.
But it was my staff.
Yeah.
Well, you can blame me, but it actually is my staff.
Well,
And
you're in charge, so you should maybe
the
get a
buck
hold of
stops
your
with me.
staff. Yep.
The buck stops with me, right? But I fired them all. So
Well,
now it is.
no, I mean, the buck stops with me. I want the money, so I get the money. So
Okay.
I'm
So
trying.
what did you do? What did you do with the money?
Give me the money.
No, what did you do with the money?
Nothing.
Okay, you're supposed to say what money, and then I go, the money Mama gave you for comedy school. Anyway, so
Well, I mean, I am good at comedy,
actually, I feel
and I'm
like
also
you're.
good at tragedy.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, yeah.
I'm a tragic and a comic.
You're tragically a comic. I'm comically a tragic, but I feel like you are a product of of my making in some way. In some way.
Yes, I'm your grandson, so I mean,
Yes.
it kind of adds up.
So I have to decide, does the talent skip generations, stay with generations, or does it just continue on like a like a well flowing stream?
It does continue on.
Yes, it does. Indeed, it does.
Yep, it's
Mhm.
true.
I
Well,
know.
actually, I think it might improve over time. It gets better with age.
Some things do improve over time. I think within our but I think that's where no, I don't. I think you have to really qualify what you mean when you say it improves over time, because I don't like, and you don't like, I don't believe, or don't agree with, I should say.
Progressivism.
Yeah, or the evolution that man is going to a zenith.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's like, no, guess what? Every generation goes through the um, same challenges,
Yeah.
same achievements, and they're just all in different. They're just slightly different. The differences are accidental.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
I think there's always give or take. There's always good and bad in every generation. So I think that it's unrealistic to look at things as everything improves over time. It's just, I mean, things break down over time. And yeah, I mean, knowledge builds upon other knowledge, right? The fact that we have smartphones today is obviously a clear difference from before,
Mhm.
but that is a
Mhm.
result of previous generations. It's not just like it's all of a sudden better and we know what we're doing. We still don't know what we're doing, but we do have history that we can look at, and we have a lot of things that are at our disposal. But that doesn't guarantee moral superiority, because I think that it can be clearly shown that our morality is dipping over time, even more than it used to be. But again, yeah, you're right. There are the same difficulties that we run into now and back then, but you do have some improvement as far as like making air conditioning, stuff like that. But you still have the same problems such as like tyranny and uh, moral decline, things like that.
And again, on the flip side, you have pious or people that are attempting to be virtuous and strive for holiness.
Well, that's also
So you
true.
have Yeah, you have all the mix involved.
You
So
have the same
some,
type of people, even
yeah,
though there's different circumstances.
yes. In the beginning, you have well, you and I would say Adam and Eve. Um, Richard Dawkins would say Og. Og,
Og and Magog.
took Og and Magog.
That's
Og
really funny.
took the rock and then threw it at Kashmir. That's his
Cashmere.
wife, cave
That's a
woman
lot
thing.
more normal name than Og.
Yeah, it was a step in evolution that he came up with that. But he would throw a rock at her, okay? And then the next generation, he had the rocks tied to a stick and it could hit her, okay? And then he could hit the neighbor who was trying to steal his wharf, which that was a the pre-ancestor of the cow, the wharf. And it wasn't an so anyway, so he had to protect his wharf from Magog, and he tied that stone to the end of a stick. And then he realized he could use the next generation, Og's now grandson, figured that he could put the rock at the end of a stick and throw the rock even farther. And then the next generation, they came up with the idea of tying a bow together and shooting the rock and the stick from even longer distance and more force. And then the next generation decided we could put fire on that. Instead of having the rock put a bunch of fire on it, and so every generation still had to was dealing with Magog and or the person attacking him, or maybe he just wanted that person's good. But the difference was is the weapons became more clever and more lethal,
Yeah.
and but the same motivations are still there.
Yeah, that's actually a really
And
good point. Um, Even though you have different tools at different times, you're still trying to achieve the same things. Survival.
right, and you're doing it for the same reasons. Some people are going to do it for lust and greed. Some people are going to use those for defense and protection against other people or wild animals. So yeah, the same motivating factors there. It's just that the lethality of the weapons changed, and that caused a little bit of a change in how people would maybe want to go to war. Because maybe before they're like, "Oh, let's go to war with them. We're only hitting with sticks anyway, and we just get beat up." Well, now because the sticks have atomic power, each side goes, "Well, maybe we're just not going to go to war necessarily because this could be bad for both of us. So we're going to go in a different sneaky kind of war way." But it's still the same. It's still the same
Underlying
man
factors.
underlying factors, underlying basically the underlying virtues or vices or the mixture thereof, causing man to pursue the the necessities or the minerals or whatever is of value or necessary for life
So,
throughout history.
so then that would be human nature that's constant, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So so the only thing I was thinking, tell me what you think about this though.
The only thing you were
One,
thinking?
that's it. That's all I had. No, no, you mentioned something, and I think sometimes when I'm not being real clear now, but it'll come clear to everyone as soon as I finish my treatments at the therapist. But um, sometimes you think of a certain situation, you think, oh, it's different than the other situations that I've associated with it. But then as you think about it more, you realize, oh, it's really kind of the same. What I mean by that is when you mentioned cell phones and that people basically, and we adapt. Okay.
Yeah.
So we adapt to, okay, we can walk to we can walk to the dinosaur egg store and buy the dinosaur eggs there, and then we can learn to ride to the dinosaur egg store and buy the egg, and then we can learn to how to drive a car, and then we can learn how to make the roads to so that we can take the car to the dinosaur egg store, and then we can learn also how to build airports and planes in order to know how to go to the dinosaur egg store to get our eggs for breakfast. But um, so we adapt and use those things, okay, according to our abilities, and it fits with us, okay,
Right.
it kind of fits. When you do something a certain way and it works, and it works good, but then there's a little adaptation that you go like, oh, why didn't I think of that before? Because that makes it even work better. So that's how things sometimes proceed, and we're able to adapt. We're able to adapt without disruption. But I wonder, though, if one of the real differences are um, is with information. I wonder if we can, because okay, all through we're supposed to communicate, right? We've been built to communicate,
Yes.
and the woman has been given a rather large mouth, and the man is given rather large or small ears. No, that's not what happens. Anyway, so
Well, that's
and
also
so
true.
yeah, so and besides the large mouth, the women have rather large ears as well, because they can hear stuff that men didn't realize they said. But no, that goes both ways, everybody. But because Pinchy and I are on the man side, we're going to see it our way every time. So anyway, um, so I was thinking, because we're built to communicate, of an exchange of information, because information is so readily available and so quickly available, and contact with one another is so readily available. Do you think that is something that we have a threshold or maximum, that, or a certain speed that we can operate well on? And if we exceed that, we become confused and scattered. Do you know what I
I
mean there?
think I get what you're saying. I'm slightly unsure, but yeah, if it's easier to do something, sometimes the motivation to want to do that becomes less. Like, because we can communicate so easily, um, we kind of lack the social intelligence that we need. But that's because it's so easy to um, say things or get our voices out there that it confuses and muddies the water. So people don't know who to listen to, who to trust. You don't have to build a rapport with people in order for them to listen to you. Um, yes, there's somewhat of a rapport that you do need in order for people to like pay attention to you to some degree, but it's really not that difficult to come by. Because
Mhm.
they don't really know you personally, and they can communicate with you so easily. I think it really puts a strain on our social connection because there's not enough difficulty there. So when you see somebody that is on social media a lot and the way that they communicate with people, it's very lacking in certain areas. Because when they text, everything's abbreviated, very shortened. There's a lot of acronyms, stuff like that. I think it's just easy. I'm not entirely sure all the reasons behind that, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at. It's too
Yeah.
easy, and that has some social issues. I'm not entirely sure all the
Okay.
reasons
Well,
why that is, but
you go. Yeah. Actually, you're taking a step farther.
oh, okay.
The next, no, the next logical thing. all those things that you said, I want to revisit because that's exactly there. There's some things there that we need to flesh out. My first observation is it seems like there's an optimum point or an optimum speed of data transfer, and and it's a little bit like it's a little bit like everyone needs let's say protein, meat to survive. He doesn't need too little, doesn't need too much. He needs that proper amount. And okay, and so with eating, we kind of have the a very easy ability to to stop it if it's getting excessive. Bottom line is some people can't stop eating. There's a point, their stomach will explode. Okay. So, but it seems like the mind's ability to take data is almost bottomless. But it doesn't mean that the rest of us, can process that in any meaningful way. And so,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I think it comes down to this. Um, we, in order to really know something and to really have a hold on the facts of something, or let me give an example. Like, I'm solving a math problem. It's not helpful to have 100 different things vying for your attention at the same time while you're trying to do a math problem. While you're trying to do a math problem, the way to do it is to focus on the math problem very studiously and very
methodically,
intently. Um,
yeah, methodically,
right,
line upon line. Yeah.
and that's how we think critically, is by analyzing. And analyzing can't be done if you have 100 things to analyze at the same time. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's not really analyzing. That's more like an overview, summary kind of thing, where I can look up, like, I've done this many times, some random thing on the internet. Like, the other day I was looking at how plastic is made. Like, half of the things I read, I don't remember. I remember kind of the gist, but that happens many times where I'm really interested in learning something, but I really don't retain it. I mean, it's like kind of cool at the time, but it ultimately is meaningless to my mind if I don't sit down and really focus in on it. I just look up etymology of this word. Okay, cool. Then I move on. I think that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when I first brought up this subject, and you listed off symptoms, and I want to return to the symptoms of what occurs, and you brought up a really good point, and it's actually there's certain principles apply across the board in almost every facet.
Yeah.
And some principles are so foundational, they apply in every facet in interaction in life. And some only apply in a few. But when you talked about communicating with one another, if I were to ask you, which is better, local control or distant control of a community?
Um. Okay, so I would say local control. Um. Yeah, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's
Yeah,
more
the poles
to
are
the idea of federalism, but
right.
yeah, I would say basically.
Yeah, one of its principles of federalism or of a democratic republic is to try to get the rule or the governance as close to the citizen as possible. And so like, okay, in a home, father and mother rule. And then it builds out from that. And so so the interaction that you might have with your wife, or the wife might have with her husband, or they might have with their kids, or those people may have with their neighbors, um uh there's going to be a lot more um knowledge of the intense knowledge of those people, and they're gonna also be held accountable more so than the distant guy, because so if I'm arguing with my neighbor, maybe he won't let me use his mower tomorrow.
Right.
You know, so I'm also hopefully I want to communicate with him in a loving and growing friendship. But if I don't, there's also some cost involved. And kind of you were saying that in the world today that and we're on social media and everything is interacting through a device and not our real words or texting and abbreviating. Our sincerity or our charity, we kick to the wayside a little bit. Whereas when you're communicating closer to those closer to you, you kind of you do it at your peril. If you're gonna be mean to your wife, she's gonna get back at you somehow. And if you are gonna be mean to your husband, it's gonna get back to you somehow. And then hopefully there's a resolution and repentance and forgiveness, and then you resolve it. But with
Hmm.
those that are farther away from you, you're not as concerned.
Right. And I think we are not as concerned. And what we see in this day and age is the people that complain about you aren't really people that actually listen to you. What I mean by that
Or know you. Yeah, yeah, that's a good
is
point. Yep.
the system that we have um, of censorship. The people that are censoring you are people that want power and control, whereas in normal day activities, I don't know if I would use the term censorship, but there's a lot more feedback that is real feedback and not the fake stuff that the media pushes, which is just, we want to control your speech. Whereas in normal daily conversations, it's more of a natural feedback that happens where you realize that the person that you're communicating with is another individual and a human being that has their own emotions. Whereas when
Mm-hmm.
you remove the personality from that, it kind of just removes the ability to check ourselves. I think that's a really big thing is we don't have any skin in the game
Right.
with these things. And then the
Right.
skin in the game that we do have, um, the people that are criticizing us and silencing us are tyrannical bureaucrats or the media that has a, a stake in censorship. That's like
Yeah.
the only feedback that we do have.
Right. Well, and so there would be a tendency. So I'm going to throw away. That's why I said also in the very beginning. I said sometimes you recognize something, you think it's different than this other group of things, and then as you start to look at it more, you're like, oh wow, it's a lot more similar than I thought originally. And so the social media, the interaction, the connection, the flow of information. Um, doesn't need to be thrown out. Just like we say that guns don't kill people, people do, you know? And at some point, Og and his wife Kashmir realized, Kashmir said to Og, that rock didn't kill your neighbor. You did, you know?
Right.
Uh, so, so with this, uh, um, the tools and technology that we have for instant communication, instant connection, instant information, and a boatload. Um, you know, it's not the device's fault. It's our lack of virtue
Mm.
on how to maintain that. But that being said, um, this also points to maybe another truth that is even deeper and more important, and that is because we are so drawn by information and communication, even if we want to just share our viewpoint with everybody because we're right, or or because we want to interact with other people that agree with us or disagree with us because we love the interchange information, or we're reading. Don't fault you for wanting to know how plastic is made. I'm glad you brought that up because last night I was losing sleep about that, and hopefully when we're done here, you could share that with me. No, but I do that too. There's amazing videos and of how things are made and different things, and oh, you know which animal has the longest tail, and there's a video about that, and
Yeah.
then funniest cat videos, and then so um so there's all that information that draws us in. But this tells us something. It tells us that communicating one with another is very core, perhaps the most core part of our being. That we are to, and that being we are to be in relation to something outside of ourselves,
Right.
whether that be our neighbor, uh, our spouse, our children, and of course, all those included. We are to be in relation to those things. And ultimately, the greatest relation would be between the creature and the creator. And so we're driven to that. And
Yeah.
so it's like a drug that we can't resist almost, that maybe it's harder to stop than, I have a really problem. I have a hard time not hitting my neighbor in the face. Well, guess what? That habit you can break pretty easy, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, but but maybe but this habit, because it is so necessary and so
Ingrained. Yeah.
core to our being, that it makes it's like it's like the finger in the dike, the water on the other side, the little Dutch boy protecting the city behind him because the dike is leaking, and so he puts his finger in there and it stops it, you know. But as soon as he lets that finger out and pulls it out of the hole, and the water starts coming through that little hole, the weight of it behind that dike eventually makes that hole bigger, bigger, and bigger until the whole dam bursts and
Right.
floods the city. And I think uh, that's why the challenge of wanting to know, or are being consumed with data and information and communication, is because it is one of our basic needs.
Well, that's true. It's just like everything else that food, for instance. I mean, you can only handle so much of it, and so
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you already illustrated that. But the point is, there's only so much we can take, and so if we have an excess amount of what we do need, um, it can become a very unhealthy habit because, uh, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that can become a big issue, and we already went through a couple of the reasons.
So, some people say, well, everyone can handle a different level in intake of information or communication or relation relationship. And instinctively, I would reject that to some degree. I would agree with it, let's say, with some qualification. It's like, yeah, we do know that some people, this may vary a little bit in their ability to intake and have that communication relationship with one another. But I don't think it varies as much as people realize. Because then I was thinking that, what about the very famous person, or the very public person that is in literally contact with the world or the nation, or as a music star, a movie star, and they're having interaction, very surfacey, but a lot, and they're really good at what they do as far as interacting and entertaining or teaching or whatever it is. But a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of those people are very lonely. And why is it? Because they're built to need um, that direct connection with
Yeah,
others.
that deep
Uh,
connection,
yeah.
and I think
And
everybody does. And
yeah, Everybody needs
And
that. And if you
so
don't have
that's
it, it causes issues.
right. And that's why I really don't know what I think about the idea of introvert and extrovert. I mean, people say introverts just need deep connections with people in order for them to be friends with you or to be social. And then they say extroverts can just be friends with anybody. It's like, well, both, I think that both ideas, introvert and extrovert, I don't agree. I don't know if I agree with that. I think
Well,
that
whenever you,
everyone needs deep connection.
whenever you start describing or defining something, you're using symbols that in order to try to relate to the other, because you access it in your mind. You see that person or that thing, and okay, so now you want to talk to this other person about that. So you use words to describe that, and the words will never be quite enough. You know what I mean? It always will be
Yeah.
lacking. And so, um, so like you were saying, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you're not saying you don't disagree with the tendency, but don't you think it's more like it's more like when someone says um, there's good in everybody, some more, some less, or there's bad in everybody, some more, some less. What I mean is that when you think of a virtue, let's say the virtue of courage, and the two extremes on that is reckless, and the other extreme is cowardice. Okay, and so if you wanted to explain that courage, and you want to discuss those two extremes, if you said that person's reckless, someone will say, "Oh, he's always reckless." But that's not what you mean. It's like he tends toward recklessness,
Sure.
let's say. Okay? Or that person's a coward. He tends toward cowardice. And so but really they're a mixture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
and
guess. Sorry.
striving for the mean of courage. And then sometimes certain actions may appear to be reckless, but in reality, they're courage because he has no choice but to try to save his child. That's the right thing to do. It would be reckless for him to just jump into the torrent river for no reason.
Hmm.
Now you see him jumping in the torrent river and you go like, "Hey, he's being reckless." It's like, no, there's somebody in there that he's going to try to save. There's another factor that balances out that action or the seeming recklessness of that action. So when you're talking about introvert, extrovert, I'm kind of agree with you that sometimes we can just label someone one version or the other without really thinking, okay, you're talking about the saltiness of a nice juicy hamburger. Maybe it's a little too salty, maybe it's not salty enough. But it's not just that burger is a salt burger. It's
Right.
like,
Right. Right.
is
And
that kind of what you're
well, yeah.
saying? Or
So what I um don't like is when people say he's just introverted. Like that's a lame excuse, in my opinion, many
exactly, that's an
times
excuse. Sure.
for them being antisocial at this time. And I think that it's sometimes dangerous to make that label and to make that statement because then it kind of, even if the person that's introverted isn't trying to do something that isn't right or healthy for them, um, they could be more urged in their mind to think of themselves as introverted and not able to communicate with other people. Whereas
Hmm.
I think that the real way to approach it is that maybe you sometimes have difficulty in social situations, but if you try, you can get over that. It is difficult, it's a lot of training that goes into that. But that's what we should do when we have an excess of something, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
if I'm too extroverted, I might need to dial it down just a little bit. If I'm a little bit over the top, um,
Mm-hmm.
making friends with everybody, and then half of them don't end up being long term good friends, or I just don't pay attention to them because I've decided I can talk to anybody, and so I
Mm-hmm.
don't put enough effort into specific relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how we should approach it. It shouldn't just be, um, they've got such and such problem, and so they have no control over it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's where I have kind of a disagreement. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that there are certain tendencies that we have. There absolutely are those tendencies. So, some people are somewhat extroverted, some people are more introverted. Okay, I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we do about that?
Well,
Because, yeah,
and you brought up the fact when oh well, he's just introverted, or he's just extroverted. That's why he doesn't listen to you, and talks all the time, or whatever, or seems to demand attention or whatever. Um, and other people's excuses for our behavior, or is kind of understandable, and actually, it kind of shows a kind of a mercy factor in a sense. They're being merciful toward that person who's acting badly. But it's still not a good way of operating. But when we make excuses for ourselves, that's when it really is bad. Because when we say, "Well, maybe I should have been nicer to that person, or mingled or whatever," no, I'm just an introvert.
mm, well,
You know?
yeah, well, that's the problem I'm illustrating, I
Yeah,
think, but it can be kind
it can
of,
be true.
well, yeah, but also it can, you can start to think that way when other people say it. And so
Oh, yeah. There's
right.
another aspect. You fulfill their prophecies for you, basically,
Right. And so it might
right?
not be their intention to cause you to become more introverted when they say he's just introverted, but it can have that inadvertent effect of making you think a little bit more that way of I'm introverted. I'm just introverted. This is
Mm-hmm.
okay. Um, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned that we should look at ourselves and engage ourselves and try to move ourselves, um, toward a more balanced or a more virtuous position, a more mean of the extremes, because there are times to be introverted. You know, maybe during a church service is not time for you to share about how you love hot dogs. You
Right.
know, okay, but so you're talking about finding the mean, and so you're right. We do have to. We can gauge ourselves, and sometimes we feel, "Gosh, I was just such an idiot there. I should just." It's a reminder that okay, I need to say that to that person how much I appreciate them instead of just keeping it inside. I know I'm shy or whatever, and I don't want to make a scene, but sometimes I just need to do that because I know I feel good when people do that for me, or vice versa. There's times when I just need to shut up and not say anything during the whole meal because I have a lot to say, and I just have to yield to that, and I can just say, "Oh well, I'm extroverted, I'm outgoing, I'm just a fun person." It's like, okay, those may be all true, okay, but you can dial it back. So you're right. We gotta gauge ourselves. But then
It
we
always seems to come
also,
down to that in many
yeah,
areas.
yeah. Well, and then also, um, we got to balance that out with. Paul said that he doesn't even judge himself. You know, and that would seem contradictory to some other things that Paul has said. And so I'm going to put words into Paul's mouth that he didn't say, and you can take it or leave it. That maybe when you put those two seemingly different contradictory positions together, maybe what he's saying is ultimately the judge of myself is not the deciding factor. And actually, he says that. He says the Lord judges me. Um, uh, it's somebody outside ourselves, but I still need to judge myself. And the reason why he would say that I don't even judge myself, um, is because he realizes that in his judgment of himself, he can either be too harsh with himself or too lenient with himself. And that will create another false way of behaving, you know, of reacting because you are analyzing the situation wrong. And so then Paul in another place cries out, "Oh, wicked man, what help is there for me? I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do." And he said, and then he mentions the answer is that the Lord. And so the Spirit,
Is that the
one of the
Lord?
he basically says that thank goodness that we've been set free by Christ.
Okay.
But it's not set free once. It's like set free all along our whole lives as we're struggling in this struggle. Because yeah, God might realize he sets people free, but we learn it day by day, action by action, situation by situation. And we're challenged to believe him again or have trust or have faith or have patience again in every situation we face. And so Paul's like going, "Oh yeah." And so even in this situation when we're analyzing ourselves, the Holy Spirit is one of the purposes that Jesus came, or he said the Spirit is to convict the world of sin. And then um, someone will go, "Yeah, convict those dang sinners, make them know they're sinners." It's like, okay, yeah, that's true, but what about the guy in the mirror? You. So the Lord um, is faithful to convict us rightly and balance out our if we're looking at ourselves in the introvert extrovert uh, scenario, and maybe we're being too lenient with ourselves that gosh, I'm too introverted, I didn't share, and maybe we're feeling some tug or conviction going like, no, don't give yourself a pass on this again. No, you're having an issue with this. Okay, that helps us not um, misdiagnose our intent. Even to some point, we still can't know and real clearly
Right.
with absolute certainty, but it helps us, and that takes time. And so I don't know if that whole thing was necessary, but um, you and I have been talking about, and we've been talking about others about the idea of accountability and um, it can be a real self-analyzation or self-awareness needs to be done, or self-awareness checks need to be
Self-analysis. Yeah.
had. Self-analysis needs to be done, but we have to keep in mind that we err on the side of leniency and harshness and in
That's
between.
true.
Okay, and so we could uh, on one side you could say, well, if I'm too harsh on myself, that's better than being too lenient. But in reality, in the end, the fruit that you produce is the same defective fruit, whether you come from either extreme. And
Yeah.
so then, anyway, coming back to your introvert extrovert thing, because you go ahead. You
Well,
had
I just wanted to say something about what you said. Um, we can't fully self-analyze ourselves. We have to have something to look at, some mirror, some
Mhm.
metric to compare ourselves to. And it's not, I don't mean like compare like, am I worse or better than this? I guess it would be more to say to remind ourselves the truth. I guess is what
Mhm.
it would be. Um,
Right.
how does Jesus look at somebody that acts and thinks this way? Kind of analysis, um,
Mhm.
which is found in Scripture and um, in natural law. There's other ways to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it comes down to. Is we can't be our own metric. We can't be our own ruler. In two ways.
Mm-hmm.
Both ways. Um,
Measure yourself.
right,
Measure yourself, O ruler.
right, and so we have a tough time measuring ourselves, and so we have to rely on some other metric.
Well, and you bring up an excellent point because, um, uh, so yes, we are to analyze ourselves. We can look at standard moral behavior and have a standard to go by and measure ourselves with that, and so we do that, and we depend on the Holy Spirit to do that within us.
Right? Yeah, yeah. That conviction.
But because the Lord knows that even in those situations, because we are so bent on our own way, that a person may say, because we're so bent on our own way, God wrote it in a book so that you could look at that book and go like, okay, those words are just plain and simple symbols, and I don't care if I'm giving myself leniency. It seems like what I'm reading here doesn't give me much leniency. So there's kind of a authority outside of ourselves that can help us be less um, the fake spiritual of like I'm hearing voices. I trust the voices because the Spirit is leading me. Well, the Bible and the Scriptures are a clear, kind of written thing. Not kind of written thing; it is written. Uh, uh, that helps bring that more outside of ourselves.
Yeah, and
But then,
sorry.
oh, that's okay. I won't be long in here, and then, but we can use that. We can use that to go back to that same self-analyzation and same self-rule, even by using those written scriptures. This is how I'm perceiving it. So then another level of authority comes in a sense, or a different kind of authority comes in a sense where it's your pastor, let's say, or your neighbor or your wife saying, well, you're reading that wrong, you know? And so, and I'm thinking of like, and there are times that I would think that we all need someone that we have absolutely no control over to tell us what to do. And I'm thinking of like a father or a mother and their children. And, the child knows certain behaviors are right or wrong. He knows their attitudes tend to right or wrong. He knows that perhaps God expects them to go right or wrong. But when dad or mom say, this is what you're going to do, and your mind processes it through, and you go, okay, you look at the rules of the household, or you look at what your common sense says, and then you hear a voice going, Isaiah, you know much more than your dad. I want you to follow your conscience. And God is like, no, I want you to follow your dad and what he said. And this opens a whole other clarifications, right? And qualifications, because what if your dad says you're to hit your sister, right? But that's a different issue. But in general, children that are listening for voices to guide their what they do as they grow up in their household, rather than just listen to mom and dad, are off on the wrong tangent, right? And so and so anyway, I don't know why I was going that way, and it wasn't because I want everyone to be Catholic,
But
but
doesn't
but it's
everything?
not.
Isn't that the all
Well,
always the
that's
reason?
well, it's like And so the audience will
Yeah.
know of my great wisdom. No, it's synonymous for me. Do I want everyone to be saved, or do I want everyone self to be a Christian? So when I have my goal to make everyone Catholic is in that same vein, and so I can't help it.
No, no, I get
Yeah,
it.
and I know you know that, but this doesn't even have to. Even though this might seem to set up a support, there's still a principle there that is important to learn. Is that there are times that we have to relinquish our decision and give someone else the call. You know, and and hopefully most of the time it's like, uh, hey, I think we should kind of go this way, and maybe the other person say, I kind of think we should go this way. It's not that other person say, no, we're going to go completely opposite. Hope most of the time it's going to be in the general area of where if we're learning correctly and we're using virtue and we're using our intellect and we believe in true principles and absolutes and we believe that there is laws of logic, it should keep us in the same vein, right? And so why would it be hard to go like, okay, I need to submit to what you're doing on this. Let's go. You know, and so that is important just even in business. In business, I as a manager or when I was under someone, under a manager amongst my peers, um, it's really easy to get the idea that you know better than the manager. And sometimes you might, you know, but if in the meantime you're complaining to the captain which way he's steering the ship and you're not paddling because that's your job, that's not helping things, right? On your break from paddling, maybe go talk to the second in command and say, hey, I think we're headed the wrong way, or I think this, or whatever. But coming back to your introvert and extrovert and kind of analyzing and not making excuses for ourselves, it's really important that we open up ourselves to honest input into our lives, even when it's uncomfortable.
Right. It goes down to the rapport again, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I could come to you, or you could come to me and correct me on something and be completely correct. But if you haven't developed that rapport, or I haven't allowed to, neither of us have developed a rapport, maybe those words won't be as helpful to me. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, well, I was more talking about rapport and feedback, the two things that we talked about. So yeah, definitely having the rapport, so that we can communicate with people, and we can trust people, but also having that second voice, uh, informing our decisions or helping us to see where we went wrong, or see
Well,
what excesses we have, like yeah, yeah.
well, and everything works together. So, uh, we don't have a rapport. We're really good at making excuses for ourselves in all different, but and so someone you come to me and tell me something true, let's say, and we don't have a rapport, or actually we do, but I say, if I can't receive from him, I can't really trust him. But yet everything you said is spot on, let's say. Okay? Okay. God does want us to develop rapports and lines of communication in order to help one another be held accountable. But when that doesn't happen, or in the midst of the different varieties that happens well or poorly, God has another aspect going on, because it's not the rapport or you or me or someone else that should be our focus. it should be the truth, regardless who comes and tells us. So when someone tells us the truth, or gives us a better direction, but we don't receive it because we judge the deliverer, the messenger, and we rather than have a love of the truth, we will reject truth because of our dislikes or non-approval of others, let's say. And so, and so go ahead.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, though, sometimes there are people that tell you the truth at one point, but then lie to you at another because they want to get something out of you. And so sometimes it
Yeah,
is a justified distrust for certain
right,
things.
sure,
And so,
it
like,
can be.
and so sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's we aren't receptive to truth when we hear it, but sometimes it's just it's really difficult to take what somebody says seriously when they've lied to you, or
Hmm.
when they tell you the truth at one point and then lie to you at another point.
Or I agree with you, but even then, you can see God's workings are so manifold. It's every There's not a counter move or an excuse that he doesn't have just a simple move to go like, oh, you're gonna do that? Okay, here. and then and then and then you go like, oh, I can wiggle myself out of this, and then you move over here. Oh, okay. How about this? So you're right. There is let's say your example I think is good. So someone tells us something really true and displays virtue, and then maybe someone tells us something false. And not just something false, but let's say there's a certain uh
Deception?
uh well, deception, or there's a certain filthiness to it in a sense. What I mean is that the uh it's let's just say it's unclean. There's a certain uncleanness to it that, and I don't mean just, I'm not talking anyway. Um and and so you're right that okay, that would cause you to not maybe trust that person again. But then I think God would counteract that. He would go, okay, you're right, but I just want you to know that you're setting up yourself up to have another piece of an excuse. Because when you think of that parable of the man who is forgiven so much, right? He's forgiven all that money by his master. You know, when the master calls him and says, "Hey, you owe me this money. You need you," and he begs him, or I'm going to throw you into prison and all your family. And he begs him, "Hey, let me pay you." And the master just decides to forgive him completely, right? And so what does he do? The first thing he leaves, and he sees a friend that owes him $100. He's like, he's kind of reading that this person I can't really trust, and I don't need to be embracing of that person. I need to call him out on the carpet on that $100. And so instead of doing what exemplifying or copying what his master did, is not put that as the primary thing and look at the true thing. What I mean is, when that wicked slave calls out his fellow slave that owes him $100, the truth of the matter is that that slave is made in the image and likeness of God. It's also true, in a sense, that he owes him $100. But which one do you value more? Which truth do you value more? The fact that he's truly owes you $100, or that he's truly just like you, made in the image and likeness of God? Which one are you going to give the priority to? And so, like you said, we can understand that uh, people can mistrust when they're scandalized by bad leaders, whether it be religious or public, or parents or teachers. we can understand, we have sympathy, we have that mercy to understand why someone would have those difficulties. But that can never be an excuse, because we have to go deeper. And our walk with the Lord, if we choose to walk with Him, is not like He cleaned us and He made us in His image, and we're just on His side exactly like Him. It's like, no, you are made in my image. You are made in my likeness. I have cleaned you and washed you, but you're not quite exactly like me yet. And you'll see as we walk together through this life that, like Peter said, Peter tried to say, "Oh Lord, wash my head and feet as well." And the Lord said, "No, I've already made you clean, but you will have to wash your feet." Why? Because He's walking through this world, and things will cling to us. And anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, and hopefully that was not too far.
No, no worries. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like we went through a lot already. So, how do you feel about wrapping up?
Yeah, I do. I feel that we could. What's interesting is just another proof that um, there's always side discussions to be had with anything that is of value,
Yeah.
and and um, and so hopefully our discussion, the audience out there, especially those thousands and thousands in Hong Kong, um, uh, Isaiah and I are processing our thoughts with one another, and it's not like we're presenting something that we've polished and go, here's a really great vitamin, or here's a really great tool. It's like, well, we think we're discussing good vitamins or good tools or good ideas, but we're discovering and we're sharpening and seeing things as we discuss. And that's why both him and I, and maybe I'm more susceptible to going on sidebars or
No,
tangents.
no, we all are. Me and you
Yeah,
both are.
but that's why it happens, and hopefully that if you're taking the time to listen, we really appreciate it. Hopefully,
Absolutely.
we are not. We do believe in absolute truth. We do believe that there is a truth to be known, and so and we're not necessarily saying this is our truth. You have to agree with it. Although there might be points that we would agree upon that, yeah, you do need to agree with it, but we realize that takes time, and you can use your thoughts and ideas, and maybe after listening to us, you you realize a better way to make Jello pudding. That's okay, because that's the sidebar that it took you, and that's what we hope happens with those
No,
and
I
for those
absolutely
who
agree.
listen.
I
Yeah.
think it's not necessarily what we say that is the most important thing here. Right? It's we're attempting to spur on people to think more deeply about these things and think through these things themselves. And that's my ultimate. That's what I hope. I don't want people just to look at me and me and you and say, "Well, George
They
and
have the
Isaiah
answers.
said this, and they have the answers." I
Hmm.
mean, maybe we have information that is helpful, and that's also hope. But also it's just to spur on people to think about these things as well.
Well, in a sense, too, it's very true that we wish that anyone that would be listening to us could be involved in our conversation, because they may see something or take us down a path that is, leads us to something really interesting. Um, and I don't mean interesting just because we're curious to see new shiny things.
Right.
No, uh, we love the Lord. We're seeking Him, and we love others, or attempting to love others, and anything that will help us do that better is interesting to us. Right? And so, um, but if we were to have you know, 1,000 mics out there for people to interact with us during this conversation, that conversation probably wouldn't get past a few sentences, and it would be so impossible, because just for you and me to guide our thoughts and try to keep our thoughts together with one another,
it would take 1,000,000 years to get anywhere.
It would take 1,000,000 years to get anywhere. And that comes back to the very interesting thing about local law, local rule. It's like, if everyone in the country had, let's decide on what the speed limit should be in the school zone, we'd still be talking about it. We'd still be having a revolutionary war about it because it would take forever. But because we have, in a sense, top-down authority that dissipates the rules down through to the local, and the local applies it on their level, it's doable.
I'm laughing really hard because we're
going on another tangent
on other things. It's funny because we're just talking about it.
But it is so important, and then someone will go like, "Oh, well, that's just because." This is another tangent, I promise to close. But this is another tangent. We're this top-down authority, which brings other tangents. Is it really top-down authority, and how is it? With God, it is top-down authority, but it's intrinsic. Not only is he ruling from above, but he said he lives in those who love him. And so he's actually ruling from above and from within each, from the lower part, right?
Yeah.
So then when you look at the way that most good governments work, or even kind of poor governments, they kind of are modeling something that already exists even before men came up with it.
Yeah.
Men just discovered it and found this as a way to function based on the way we are. All right, I'm done. I'm not going off on any sidelines. So everyone, thank you for listening. Hopefully, hopefully you're not on fire. If you are,
I hope
get
so
water.
too.
Hopefully you're not under the water. And in that case, fire wouldn't help you. Just get above the water. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thumbs up or thumbs down or commenting. And really appreciate you. And so love you, Pinchy. Godspeed.
Last thing.
Huh?
Subscribe and hit the bell button. The bell so that you can get our notifications if you want, of course.
I don't want to go on a sideline, but what bell should they hit? Should they hit the bell at the school or the...
No, obviously not. I'm just saying, if we want to get notifications whenever we have a podcast out, or video, whatever you call these, the bell really helps to do that. So.
Yep. Yeah, so, all right, thank you. Godspeed.
Have a good week.